I feel lucky.
Are you guys back in?
And I think everybody did a great job.
Yeah.
Unlike the internet, you know?
Yeah, right. I know. It's right.
Oh, my God. All of these fire experts. Why didn't you just fly a helicopter into the ocean? And then just, I don't know, because there was 100-knot winds? You want to do that? You want to do that at night, you lunatic?
Now, for the record, Bill Burr is one of my favorite comics of all time. Absolutely love his sets, particularly his older stuff. Thought in the late 2000s, early teens, I guess it's early teens. I don't know how to describe the early part of a century. Anyways, thought he had some banger sets, like phenomenal. Unfortunately, since then, Bill has gotten married to a harpy, and he has also spent a lot of time in Hollywood making movies. And as a consequence of that, he has become a woke tard. Sorry, just calling it how I see it. It's unfortunate, but you couldn't really, you couldn't fit a piece of paper between he and Gavin Newsom's arguments when it comes to covering up what was an absolutely catastrophic response to the fires in Southern California. I'm born and raised there. I know the area well. I know what these fires are capable of. I am not naive. I'm also not a fire expert. But guess what? You don't need to be a fire expert, scare quotes, in order to know that 12,000 homes burning down is not doing a great job. Okay? I know. Bold claims here coming from a rube like me, just a guy sitting on his couch thinking to himself, man, this seems like they could be doing more to stop the complete obliteration of the Pacific Palisades. But that's the reality. They could have done more. And I'm not just guessing at this. It's because I've actually followed this closely, because I actually did the research on my own. I know, God forbid.
Why is Gavin so adamant about pushing this narrative that they did not run out of water in the Pacific Palisades? Well, it's because they did. A firefighter told me that he was on a street in the Pacific Palisades, and not only did he run out of water, but they had insufficient hydrants. So he explained to me that the standard distance between residential homes is usually less than 1,000 feet. And in this case, these homes were very large. We're talking like 15,000 square foot mansions and hydrants that were over 1,000 feet apart. In addition to that, running out of water and these hydrants being too far apart, these hydrants only had a 2.5-inch wharf hydrant instead of 4 inches, which means the diameter of the hose. This means that these firefighters did not have sufficient fire flow to extinguish these fires. He told me that they were doing the best that they could and they were making good effort, but they could have saved more homes by putting up a water curtain, which would have allowed them to save the exposure of houses. But they couldn't because they ran out of water in the Pacific Palisades.
Another thing that I did my research on my own and came to a different conclusion than Bill Burr was during the lockdown era. And guess what? I got almost everything right, and Bill Burr got almost everything wrong.
You want people to walk down the street with a mask on?
Let's not start this, Joe.
Do you, though?
Let's not start this. Okay.
Let's start it.
I don't want to start this bullshit. I'm not going to sit here with no medical degree, listening to you with no medical degree, with an American flag behind you, smoking a cigar, acting like we know what's up better than the CDC. All I do is I watch the news once every 2 weeks. I'm like, mask or no mask? Still mask? All right, mask. That's all I give a fuck.
So maybe Bill ought to be doing a little bit of his own research as opposed to just parroting with appeals to authority to criminal politicians who pathologically lie to us and lead us astray time and time again. I know. You would think that after his track record of the past 4 years and realizing that he got duped, he would be doing that. But apparently he hasn't even realized that he's been duped. Or, because I do think that Bill Burr is a smart guy, he just knows where his bread is buttered, and he has decided to basically break his own brain. He has decided to not tell the truth anymore. And that's even more sad. I would actually prefer to believe that he's an idiot than to believe that he's a liar. But at this junction, I'm kind of convinced that he's either a liar or he's lying to himself, which enables him to continue to not see the obvious truth that the state of California, that Gavin Newsom, the mayor of LA, all of these politicians that have been put into these positions of power by people like him that vote Democrat no matter what, are ultimately responsible for the destruction of the state of California. Now, it's not just the fires, it's also the taxation. It's also the regulation. It's the fact that the entire government of California, from top to bottom, including in my hometown of San Diego, has been taken over by woke lunatics, people who don't think critically, who don't value freedom whatsoever, and just want to virtue signal during times of crisis. That's the whole reason I left the state of California, is because it was brutal. Because when you have people that aren't capable of doing a fucking job, well, things don't work anymore. I get accused a lot, particularly because of my shaved head and my visage, that perhaps my opposition to DEI is, at its core, racist. Wrong. I think that there are many examples of people who don't look like me that do jobs far better than I can. For instance, the entire NBA. There's like 70% black guys, and they're awesome, and I wouldn't want to change it. But you know what's weird? For instance, and this is a little bit off the beaten path for a show like this, I don't usually talk about sports, but I am a huge sports fan. The NFL has something called the Rooney Rule. Guess what the percentage of black players in the NFL is? Well, it's over 50% again. Probably far higher. I'm not even going to look it up because we all know it's true. And guess what? None of us care because we want the best on the field, because we want the best games. So we don't really care about what people look like. We just want the best. Well, the NFL has a Rooney Rule where they have to interview a minority candidate for every head coaching position before they hire anybody. They have to. And if they don't, they get fined. I think they get draft picks taken away. The punishment is significant, so they all do it. It's usually performative. They bring in some black or brown guy, and they interview him, and then they go with whoever they wanted to in the first place. But they did this because they felt as if there wasn't enough black head coaches. Imagine if you were to do the same thing for players on the field, that before you decided what your starting lineup was going to be in the NBA or your starting 11 in the NFL, or I guess 22 if you're going offense, defense, that you had to give a sit-down interview with a white guy. Because by percentage basis, white people are more than half the country. Why are we not more than half of the NFL? Why are we not more than half of the NBA? Well, it's because we're not as athletically gifted. I know, a very controversial take, but it's true. And we all kind of accept it. And I'm not even upset about it. Most people aren't, because they realize that biology matters. But when it comes to the coaching position, despite the fact that these are the same principles at play, these are multi-billion-dollar companies, basically each team is that, should they not have their own prerogative to dictate and decide who they want to hire as a head coach? Of course they should. Are they not going to be interested in winning, given that winning equals more money? Of course they will. So should you not rely on them to make the best decision, just as you rely on the head coach to decide who's going to be on the court or on the field as their starting lineup? Yeah, you probably ought to. They have a lot of skin in the game, and ultimately it's their company, so you shouldn't have any fucking say as to who they hire and how they hire them. Setting aside, coercion and sexual assault or something, which would be a really weird thing to do to an NFL head coach. But they don't do that. They don't. They have a particular rule to make sure that you have a performative interview with a black guy or a brown guy. It's absurd. Way off the beaten path here. The point that I'm trying to get to is that because you have a focus of something other than excellence, of something other than being the best in hiring practices when it comes to every single layer of the government of California, you are now surrounded by people who are not capable. That is not to say that everybody who is a lesbian, everybody who is black or brown or whatever that's in a position of power in the California government is not capable of doing their job. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that as soon as your hiring practices prioritize something other than capability, well, then you're going to have problems. And guess what? You now have problems to the tune of over 20,000 structures that have been incinerated. That's what happened. Now, again, this is not racial because a lot of the people that are responsible were white because their brains are broken because they're liberals. It's the truth. Prioritizing anything other than excellence, anything other than capability. And that is what California has done for decades. And you are now bearing the fruit of that fateful, wrong-headed decision. And as a consequence, people are dead. Now, that seems like a bold claim, but it's really not. When you talk about vital services like firefighting, is really important. My brother happens to be a firefighter in Northern California. Fortunately, he was not called into the inferno in Southern California. They did send a strike team from his department down there. He was not on it. I was very nervous because that fire was completely out of control. But he didn't have to go. But firefighting is super important, obviously. When you have, and just to make Bill Burr's defense a little bit more valid, it's very hard to put out a fire during the Santa Anas. The winds during a Santa Ana are extraordinary. We're talking sometimes over 100 miles per hour. Yeah, if you want to put out a fire at 100 mile per hour winds, good fucking luck. It ain't happening. So I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is because they weren't prioritizing excellence, they didn't have the precautions put in place to prevent a fire of this nature, given that Santa Anas are not a constant, but a consistent factor that no one's surprised by when they happen. Again, I'll reiterate, spent over 30 years there. No one's surprised that the winds picked up in Southern California. It happens every year, it seemed like, when I was growing up. So not a surprise. So what do you do given the knowledge that you're going to have extraordinary winds and you're surrounded and you're basically in a desert that has a lot of trees somehow? You know that the winds come. The winds are coming. You know it's coming. What are you going to do? Well, a rational response would be, well, we're going to prepare. We're going to make sure that our water reservoirs are filled. Oh, by the way, they had record rainfall for the past 2 years, and they didn't save most of it because they weren't focused on hiring the best, because the best would have been focused on keeping that fucking water in a reservoir, wouldn't they? Of course they would. But that's not what you were focused on, so you didn't get that. What else might you do? I know none of us are fire experts here, so this is really fucking hard to figure out, but I'll tell you what you would have done. You would have done controlled burns. You would have used other employees to go out and clean the forests of deadfall, of the leaves and fallen trees, anything that was highly flammable. Yeah, I know, crazy. You would have done fire breaks, where you actually burn out sections so that you don't have a fire that's able to hop over to a larger, populated area. I'm not a fire expert. These are just rational, logical things that you might do. There's a lot of other ideas I could come up with. Some of them probably wouldn't be as good as those, but I'm just saying, we're spitballing here. Lots of obvious things you would have done. They didn't do them. They didn't do them, not necessarily because they hate the people there. I don't think they do. I think that their ideology is sick, that they've lost focus of what really matters, which in government is functioning government, that you're going to actually prevent catastrophes. But if your focus is on, well, how many lesbians are working in the fire department, well, that's not exactly going to prevent fires now, is it? Now, that's not, again, just to reiterate, not to say that lesbians can't be great firefighters. I'm sure a few are. But on the whole, 95% of the fire force, if that's what it's called, fire department, were men, even with all of their focus on wokeness.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
But everybody in a position of power seemed to be a lesbian. It's kind of weird, right? Now, maybe they were the best for the job, but maybe they weren't. And for the record, a lot of the people on the fire department, including the chief, the lesbian lady, was calling out the woke insanity of the mayor, Karen Bass of LA, saying, look, we're getting budget cuts. I'm going to her and I'm telling her we can't have budget cuts. We actually need more. We need more resources. We need more firefighters because inevitably a fire is going to hit and we haven't done the preparation necessary and we don't have the forces necessary to stop this thing. We need more. They got less. Okay.
If we cut one position, if we close one station, if we close one resource, the residents of Los Angeles are going to pay the ultimate sacrifice and someone will die.
Just last month, fire personnel packed an LA Fire Commission meeting, begging the city to rethink the budget.
These cuts came at exactly the wrong time, with calls for services at an all-time high and our firefighters at their breaking point.
We are straining our department's resources beyond the brink, and we cannot continue on this path.
Look, in government agencies, they're always going to ask for more. So it's very hard to know when you're being lied to because they all want more resources because they get more pay and more power. So you don't really know. But let me tell you, when it comes to Southern California and firefighting, you kind of want to err on the side of, safety. like, okay, you need a little bit more. Okay, we're going to give you a little bit more. You probably don't want to cut that and then focus on other, equity programs. You probably want to make sure that you have that handled, particularly given that the real estate market in Southern California is one of the most expensive in the world. Yeah, super, super expensive. The houses that were lost, most of them were $1 million+ homes. So probably worth protecting. Oh, might I add, these are also the most productive, contributive people in society, the people that pay the most taxes. You probably want to look after them because if you don't, they might leave the state, in which case your revenue drops. So like anyone with a longer term horizon of analysis on this would have been like, yeah, let's make sure we get this right. Karen Bass, she was actually in Africa when the fire broke out, sitting in for some presidential ceremony or some nonsense.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster?
And her city was on fire. Why would the mayor of LA ever be invited, much less attend some ceremony in Africa? It's fucking weird. I'm sorry, it is. And I would feel the same if it was the mayor of LA that was going to Mexico or Canada or anywhere in Europe. What the fuck are you doing? You're the mayor of one of the biggest, if not the biggest city in the country. Focus. Okay? But instead, you knew the Santa Anas were coming. You hop a flight to go to some ceremony in Africa. If that's not worth calling out, if you think it's unfair, I think it's unfair that 12,000 plus homes have burnt down. I think that's actually the real injustice here. I'm not so much interested in your feelings at this moment. Getting back to Bill Burr.
How are you?
This was definitely mismanaged.
That's a big word we're hearing now.
Mismanaged, like some idiot on the internet knows how to manage the worst fire in LA, sitting there in his underwear. You know what? Looking at the footage on the internet, I have determined that this here was mismanaged.
You know about helicopters because I remember, and it's interesting now thinking about it because you said that.
About it. I know about the one that I fly. Other than that, I don't know anything about it.
You know
but
something.
If you're on
about...
the internet, you know everything.
I hope you know.
There's this disturbing trend with Bill where he's constantly appealing to authority, but then when Jimmy Kimmel points out that, oh, you actually have some authority in this arena, you fly a helicopter, so you can actually speak to this. He goes, I don't know if I can anything. I know a little bit about the helicopter I fly on the regular, but I don't know anything about helicopters. It's like, what are you doing? And I think what it is that it's just pure pass the buck. That you don't want to ever be in a position of actually knowing the truth. that it's much easier to just plead obliviousness and then point at everybody else and say, oh, all of these people that seem to have opinions that don't jive with the narrative of the state of California, Gavin Newsom in particular, well, they're just conspiracy theorist idiots with no authority to talk on this subject whatsoever. Oh, no, by the way, neither am I. But I can still critique them because I don't know anything. And because I don't know anything, everybody else must not know anything. Well, that's not how the world works, Bill. Just because you're a fucking idiot doesn't mean that everybody else is. And when you talk to us like that, given that you're Mr. Blue Collar, Mr. Oh, I'm just standing up for the little guy against the insanity of the world, and then you shit on the little guy, good luck, dude. I hope that the next Netflix contract is 7 figures, because I don't think people are going to be lining up around the block to go see your shitty movies. And this is coming from a fan. I am a fan. But you're wrong here.
I love how all the chatter out there is about bands of illegal immigrants and homeless people lighting fires. They light fires every day. They're living outside. They're cold. And this theory that some homeless guy without a car went from Altadena all the way to the Pacific Palisades, and then we have a hang glider.
Now, this, ladies and gentlemen, is a perfect encapsulation or a perfect example of the woke mind virus. He goes, people are saying that it's the homeless that are lighting fires. Look, the homeless light fires every day. Yeah, that's not normal, Bill. It may be normal for you because you've continued to vote for these evil, corrupt politicians. But for the rest of the country, that's actually extraordinarily unusual. That you have so many homeless people that are just randomly lighting fires that an inferno could break out at any second and there's nothing we can do to stop it. And if it happens as a consequence of one of these random homeless people lighting a fire and then destroying 12,000 homes, that you just go, well, what are you going to do? There's a lot of homeless people. They're cold. What, do you want them to freeze? No, I want them to not fucking be there, Bill. I don't want there to be 100,000 homeless people in the city of LA, which there are. Excuse me, the county. 100,000 human beings live on the streets of Los Angeles County. Think about what that means. That is a city or a county that is so poorly ran, in a state that is so poorly ran, that anybody who's thinking rationally, even from a place of pure sympathy for the homeless, would say, holy shit, what are we going to do? This is not sustainable. I don't want to live like this. I don't want them to live like that. We've got to figure this the fuck out. But no, that's not what people like Bill Burr do. That's not what people like Jimmy Kimmel does. They don't. They just take it as a given because guess what? They're better than us. I know. It's weird, right? They don't do anything to actually address problems. They vote for politicians that created the problems. They continue to vote for politicians that will keep those problems alive. And yet they have this air of superiority that stinks to high hell. And you can't get away from it. And it's sincere, which is the weirdest part of it. That it's not an act. They genuinely think that they're better than the people that are at home going, hey, I'm seeing these videos of homeless people lighting fires in Los Angeles. And then I'm seeing this footage of tens of thousands of houses on fire. And I'm putting 2 to 2 together and I'm saying, I think that something should have been done here. And Jimmy Kimmel and Bill Burr go, what do you hate the homeless? Talk about missing the fucking point. No, I don't hate the homeless. They're human beings. I feel bad for them. But guess what? My priority is my family and my property. And then somewhere down the priority list are the homeless people who I don't really know. But the top priority is my family. And guess what? When you ignore these homeless people, which I have sympathy for, you create a dynamic by which there might be an inferno which burns my family alive. And I take this personally because, as you know, I still have a lot of family in Southern California. So it breaks my heart to witness this, and it infuriates me that people like Bill Burr continue to ignore reality to the detriment of genuine human suffering. And that includes the homeless. It is not to their benefit to continue to provide just enough aid to keep them basically drugged up and on the streets. Is that a sustainable path? Of course not. It's a catastrophe. Anybody that looks at any major city in the rest of the world, you would say, well, there's something deeply wrong with that country. Like, if Shanghai had 250,000 or 100,000 homeless people, you'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with China? But they don't. The CCP. They seem to manage their shit better than we do. Is that just because they're superior? Well, no, I don't think it is. But if you're going to just allow this type of situation to languish and exacerbate and become worse, you're going to have a lot of people that start to look at other countries and other government models and say, well, that must be better. Sure, they say it's communism, but it must be better than this. Not realizing that they live under socialism right now, and that's the reason everything's falling apart, and everyone's brain is broken, so no one's actually really thinking about how do we remedy this, because everyone's lying. And Bill's lying. And Jimmy's lying. And Gavin Newsom's lying. And Karen Bass is lying. And Joe Biden's lying. And the White House press secretary's lying. And most of the people that pay attention to politics are lying. Even the conservatives. They don't tell you the truth either. They don't tell you that they get the same donor capital that allows them to hide and ignore these problems. We need actual honesty if we're going to address these issues. And apparently Bill Burr, a man who made his name as an elite comic by telling uncomfortable truths, has abandoned that role for society. And that's sad. And I don't say this with any glee because I genuinely loved his shit. I loved his comedy. But I promise you, with his worldview, he will not be able to maintain the same great comedic endeavors that he once did. Because at its core, comedy requires honesty with yourself and with your audience. And he doesn't have it anymore. You wanted your Hollywood deals. You wanted your movie deals. You wanted your Netflix deals. You got them. I hope it was worth it.
And they're talking about looting, but CNN and Fox News are not going to bring up the insurance companies that are just going to keep everybody's premiums and still give themselves a bonus. Yeah. Yes. Free Luigi. I love how they acted surprised. Why did that happen? I have no idea. He wrote on the bullets why it happened.
Oh, we're back to Luigi. Okay, yeah.
I never left Luigi.
And this is when I truly knew that he had lost his mind. Because if you're actually paying attention to what's happened in the state of California, then you would know that the state of California made it illegal for the insurance companies to actually charge what was necessary to offset the risk of covering these homes in these incredibly fire-prone areas with incredibly expensive real estate and replacement costs. So many of these insurance companies, given that they now had caps on what they were allowed to charge, decided to leave the state, including State Farm. And they notified their customers, we can't make a profit here, we're leaving. You're on your own. And then California stepped in with basically a program that allowed for them to pay for insurance through the state, which means the taxpayer is on the hook. So people, let me say, imbeciles like Bill Burr want to blame the insurance companies. And I'm not fond of insurance companies. They suck, by and large. But they're also a business, and I understand business. And if you can't make a profit and you're facing an inferno of 12,000 homes because you know that the state government is ran poorly and they've now capped the premiums that you're allowed to charge your customers, well, what fucking choice do you have but to cancel those contracts and get the fuck out of there? Just like I did, a businessman who saw a situation that was untenable and left. Do I blame them for leaving? No, I don't. Do I blame the state of California for putting a cap on what they were allowed to charge that could actually enable them to stay in business while providing insurance protection to the people that lived in Southern California? Yes, I do. That's on them. But Bill, on the other hand, points the finger at the insurance companies, probably oblivious to the fact that Gavin Newsom even had that rule in place, and probably in favor of it if he was aware that that rule existed. And he says, long live Luigi Mangione, a guy who brutally assassinated a healthcare CEO and a father, I might add. You see how sick that worldview is? I hope you do. Again, not fond of insurance companies, but if you think that executing CEOs of insurance companies is how you make a more functional society, you have thoroughly imbibed communist propaganda. Health insurance is confusing, expensive, and frustrating, and claim denials are becoming more and more common. The headache of health insurance is exactly why CrowdHealth was created. It's not health insurance, it's a better way to pay for healthcare through crowdfunding. So, stop sending money to big insurance companies who profit off of not paying your bills and check out CrowdHealth. Health insurance is the bane of my existence. I don't enjoy dealing with it, but we all get sick from time to time. You break an arm, whatever, things happen. This is a better way to get the care you need. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let CrowdHealth help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months by using code LOCKDOWN at joincrowdhealth.com. CrowdHealth is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code LOCKDOWN. And Bill Burr, despite being a multimillionaire based off of the capitalist model that we live under to some extent, hates it. And he wants to point the blame at anybody other than himself and the politicians that he's supported. But that's who deserves the blame. And that's the truth. And that's the reason that my audience continues to grow. Because that's my only duty to you, to just tell the truth. There it is.
2018, even before I was governor of California, tried to withhold money down in Orange County until apparently a staff member, and this has been well reported, staff member said there were a lot of Trump supporters, then he decided to change his mind. And so the rhetoric is very, very familiar, and it's increasingly acute, and obviously we all have reason to be concerned about it.
What's the disinformation you were referring to in the letter, and what is the correct information?
Well, I mean, look, what the president-elect was saying about state water project and the Delta smelt somehow being culpable of somehow leading to some of the challenges that we face down here was it's words. It's a salad. It's the form and substance of fog. It's made up. It's delusional. And it's a consistent mantra from Trump going back years and years and years. And it's reinforced over and over and over within the right wing. And so it's become gospel. And it's so profoundly ignorant. And yet he absolutely believes it. It's not an ignorance on his part. It's sort of an indelible misinformation that he sort of manifested a falsehood. And he decided to bring it into this crisis in a profoundly demeaning and damaging way.
Given Gavin Newsom's obvious and catastrophic failures, what does he do? Does he reflect? Does he take any of the blame on his shoulders? Say, we're going to get this right. We're going to fix whatever allowed for this fire to happen. We're going to get it right moving forward. And I apologize. Or, does he have enough honor to resign? Certainly not. What does he do? Well, he goes after Donald Trump for mis and disinformation. And he goes to the White House and he asks for them to increase censorship to prevent this type of mis and disinformation.
I ask you, we've got to deal with this misinformation. There were hurricane force winds of mis and disinformation lies. People want to divide this country, and we're going to have to address that as well. And it breaks my heart as people are suffering and struggling that we're up against those hurricane forces as well. And that's just a point of personal privilege that I share that with you because it infects real people that are out there, people I meet every single day, people the mayor's been meeting with, and they're having conversations that are not the typical conversations you'd have at this time. And you wonder where this stuff comes from. And it's very damaging as well. But we're here to get the job done.
When in reality, much of what he's really concerned with is the truth. That the truth will be politically damning for him. Or at least it ought to be, but it probably won't. Because for those that aren't familiar, Gavin Newsom was actually recalled back in 2020 arena. Maybe it was 21. And then during the recall election, he won by 70%. Or not by 70%. He got 70% of the vote, or close to that. So yeah, the people of California are fucking idiots. And there's nothing I can do to help them at this point. Not all of them. Obviously, 30% or so are awesome. But 70% who would continue to vote for Gavin Newsom after he locked down the state for no fucking reason, yeah, You can't really help those people now, can you? Now, there's this big controversy over whether or not Donald Trump will withhold federal funds and aid from the state of California. Well, before you go, oh, how dare he, you might want to ask yourself, what do you do with an addict? Do you give an addict more money so that they can go get their next fix? Or do you cut them off? I know this sounds harsh. I don't care. Sometimes you need tough love. And I love the state of California. I know, a libertarian saying he loves the state. How dare I? But I do. I love the state of California. I spent 35 years there. It's fucking beautiful. I love the people. I love it all. I just don't love the government. When Gavin Newsom should have been preparing for this next inevitable fire, what was he doing? Well, he was actually Trump-proofing the state of California, deploying tens of millions of dollars to try and be prepared with attorneys and whatever lawfare set up to defend against incursions from federal power from Donald Trump.
As it relates to the special session, that's a special session to focus on litigation, preparation. As it relates to the reality, it's not a theoretical exercise. We know what happened the last time Donald Trump was president. He vandalized our progress. He vandalized our programs. He broke the law. Courts adjudicated that. It's not an assertion. He did certain things that were unwound at the agency level that attacked this state. And so we are preparing for that. And that was the whole point, is the whole point of the special session. We're not going to be caught flat-footed, and we want to be prepared as early as January 20th, and that's why the special session is important. We also have a brand new legislature coming in, a lot of new people, and this will be an opportunity to engage and convene, talk about the previous 122 lawsuits. Again, we reacted to the assault. It wasn't a proactive litigation strategy. It was a reactive strategy. I hope there's not one lawsuit with Trump administration. As I said, open hand, not a closed fist. No governor in California worked more closely. No governor in the country, I would argue, Democrat, worked more closely, Democratic governor, with Donald Trump than I did during COVID.
And now, as soon as the crisis strikes, he turns around and he puts his hand out and he says, give me all of the money to rebuild the entire destroyed state, which my own malfeasance enabled. Why should you do that? Why should everybody in the United States of America be on the hook for the mismanagement of the state of California and the people of California that voted for the mismanagement? Why should I in Florida be held liable financially for their own fuck-ups? Well, the answer is obviously we shouldn't. None of us should. And maybe you could say, oh, this isn't sympathetic to the 30% of the people that didn't vote for Gavin Newsom in the state of California. Well, look, I was in that 30%, and I got the fuck out because that was the responsible thing to do. So now you got to deal with it. You're in a state that's so mismanaged that you couldn't even get fucking fire insurance on your home. And then everything burns down. You still didn't leave after that. And now I have to pay for it. Seem fair? I'd say no. I'd say it seems totally unfair. So you need to fucking show some tough love to the state of California. They need to figure their own shit out. You do not want to enable this government to persist. And if the federal government intervenes and offers them $100 billion or whatever it costs to fix everything there, that's not good. They should suffer. Sometimes you have to suffer the consequences of your bad ideas. Because if you don't ever learn the lessons that you ought to because your ideas suck. Because a quarter of your state burnt down and you're still saying everything's fine. In fact, it's just disinformation. We need more censorship and we need more federal funds to remedy everything that is apparently fine somehow. They need to fucking figure it out. I want to be able to go back to my state at some point and not fear for my life when I visit family. I also want my family who lives there every single day to not be in danger. And as long as people like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass and the entire DEI army are in positions of power, the people of California are not and will not be safe. So you need to show tough love. And if that means that you have to put stringent requirements on how those funds are used, you have to do that. Because guess what? A scumbag like Gavin Newsom will take federal fucking funds and he will use that to further Trump-proof the state, to keep any sort of reforms from happening, reforms that are desperately needed, lest this state completely implode upon itself. So, yeah, I am fine with there being strings attached when it comes to federal aid going to the state of California, given that they created this entire dynamic. They ought to own it. I don't even support them getting federal funds, but if they're going to get them, they better come with harsh strings attached, like everybody that's found liable or responsible for this fire and these 12,000 homes and 20+ thousand structures that burnt down. Oh, and might I add, a dozen plus lives lost, incinerated, that you're actually held responsible. You ought to be charged criminally. You won't be, but at minimum, you ought to be forced to resign. At minimum. And until that happens, don't expect me to demonstrate much sympathy, and don't expect me to make light of it the way Bill Burr attempted to, terribly. It's a catastrophe. It's sad. I don't say any of this with callous, even though I am a bit calloused because of my experiences living there. I love that state, and I love the people there. So this is not about hate. This is about love. And you need some tough love, California.
I'm talking that white hot, I need to sink my teeth into something and scream kind of rage. Because what do you mean that it never had to be this hard for us? Like, what do you mean in other countries they don't have to spend 20% of their paycheck on groceries? What do you mean in other countries everyone can own homes because they're not paying $2,000 a month in rent, or that their mortgages aren't like their entire paycheck? What do you mean that people in China work one job and they don't even work 40 hours and they can easily afford their life? And then I'm over here working 60 hours a week, just me as a single parent, to like barely make ends meet, and I'm penny pinching every single second, and like there's so much of life that my kid misses out on and that I miss out on because of money and like work and no social support net. And you mean to tell me that it didn't have to be like this? They keep us in these chains on purpose, and it never had to be like this.
So the TikTok ban is back. In 3 days, allegedly, TikTok, the app, will be removed from all devices in the United States of America. I know. Crisis. I've never been, well, I think I was on TikTok for like a few weeks when it first came out, and I got off of it because I thought it was too addictive and kind of a waste of my time. Just being honest. Very entertaining videos, but like way too addictive. The algo is phenomenal. I got off there. So the reason I say that is I don't have a vested interest in this decision, other than the fact that I have a vested interest in the trajectory of our country and how we deal with property rights. And that's really what I want to talk about, is that, well, first off, let's just point out the unbelievable Streisand effect of what's happening right now. So for those that aren't familiar, there's this app. It's in Mandarin. I don't know how to pronounce the actual name of it in Mandarin, but it's called Red Note in America, or in English. And it is now the #1 app in the world. In about 48 hours since this ban basically seemed as if it was officially going to happen, millions and millions of people who are, hardcore TikTok fans, are now scrambling to get on an actual app that does basically the same thing as TikTok, but it's a Chinese company. Oops. Streisand like a motherfucker. And on top of that, now all of these Americans are seeing firsthand how Chinese people live. And what they're finding is that their lives are a lot easier than our own. Double oops. Like, oops. You really fucked up this time. If you own gold, you've probably been happy to see prices hitting new all-time high this year. But your gold can do more than just sit there waiting for the price to go up. It can generate passive income for you. I know. I didn't know about this either. With monetary metals, you can earn up to 5% interest on your gold and silver paid in more ounces of metal, and accredited investors can even achieve double-digit returns in their bond offerings, All interest payments are made in ounces of gold and silver stored in your account free of charge. Whether your metal is gathering dust at home or costing you annual storage fees, it's time to stop paying to own gold and start getting paid to own it and put it to work with Monetary Metals. Check out monetary-metals.com/lockdown to learn more about how you can start growing your wealth in ounces today. Again, that's monetary-metals.com/lockdown. I told you that prohibition ultimately doesn't work, that people are going to find a way, that so many people have gotten rich using TikTok, either as creators or advertisers or whatever, that they're going to find some sort of backup for this thing if you banned it. I assumed that it would have been an American company that made the windfall. Turns out not. Turns out that the American company, which was TikTok, I might add, as you know, they had ByteDance, so with affiliation to the CCP. But now you don't even have the American entity intermediary. Now it's just straight China. So if you were concerned about TikTok's propaganda against the American people, well, strap the fuck in, because it's about to get worse. Anyways, the reason I say I told you so is that this is the libertarian argument against prohibition. That when you fight market demands, guess what? The consumer finds another way around it. And they're doing so in rapid breakneck pace. Didn't really expect that. Didn't know that it could happen that quickly. But it is. And now you got a real problem on your hands. My deep concern is that watching people like that, and I have real sympathy for people, especially young people who are struggling financially. I think it's heartbreaking, and I understand it. It's not easy. I mean, the cost of living is extraordinary. And I just remember it was extraordinary when I came out of high school, and college, like right into the teeth of a huge bubble, the 05, 06, 07 bubble, and then the implosion right after. It was like, this sucked. So I know many of you listening lived through that. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, this generation, the young people, have lived through lockdowns and the entire psychological operations that came with that, mandates, firings, and then trillions of dollars that got printed, which created tremendous inflationary pressures. And now it's like $1,000 for groceries for one person per month, when it used to be $3,000 a year. It sucks. I get it. So I am not downplaying this. But here's my concern. This generation also went through public schooling, and most of them are still indoctrinated into what I believe are deeply flawed worldviews, like Keynesian economics or just straight up Marxism, socialism, communism, whatever. And my fear is that as they look at this and they're told that the CCP is communist and America is capitalist, which neither is really true, they're both a hybrid, that they're going to look at the lifestyles of the Chinese on this Red Note app and conclude that, well, maybe communism is actually better than this capitalist model, not realizing that they're basically just picking a poison between the two. And that's really dangerous, because they don't understand why the price of things has escalated, because they still believe that it's just about corporate greed. God forbid people actually want to get paid for a service that they provide. I know, evil. But that's what most of these people believe, especially the younger generation. Most of them think, as stupid as this is, that the cost of everything has gone up dramatically right after we printed trillions and trillions of dollars because people got greedy. I mean, just think about this logically. Why weren't they greedy the year prior to the inflation kicking up? Oh, they were greedy. Why didn't they charge these same prices in 2018 that they charged in 22, 23, 24? Oh, because they couldn't. Because competitors would have came in to undercut those prices. But competitors can't come in to undercut these prices because these are the prices because of inflation. You understand the logic there? I hope it makes sense. I'm not going to give you a 101 on it. I'm going to make it simple. That's why, okay? You can't undercut because the input costs have also gone up, because the cost of labor and materials across the board have gone up 50 or 100% over the past 4 or 5 years. So yeah, everything now costs more, and it ain't going to stop until we have a deflationary bust, which we might. We definitely might. But in the interim, these people who don't understand economics whatsoever and just think that it's corporate greed are going to say, well, we need a CCP-styled government, one that has a iron fist that controls every corporation in China, right? They're living better than us. That's the direction we got to go. Now, if you were concerned about TikTok being a spying and propaganda tool to direct the minds of the youth in this country, well, now you got a real fucking problem, because the youth of this country is now going to be convinced that the CCP model is better than the American one. And I can't blame them, because the American model taught them nothing. And now they're going to look at this and they're going to come to the wrong conclusion, that in fact the CCP model is superior, because our education system didn't do anything to fucking teach them that that's wrong. That the reason that America is declining is because we're acting too much like China. But it's really hard to make that pitch, especially when they're looking at the app and saying, well, if that's true, Clint, why does China look better than us? Yeah, it's a tough argument. It's a tough sale. But someone's got to make it. So I'm trying. On deaf ears with people that don't understand economics. So what am I going to do? I don't know. But I'll tell you what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't be banning their apps, because a lot of young people that have very limited opportunities, which is why they're on TikTok, which is why they're on OnlyFans, I might add, all the fucking moral posturing about all these reprehensible pornographers, these women with no values that are out doing this. You want to take a little blame when you made it impossible for them to actually get ahead because inflation became so brutal? You want to take a little blame when their entire lives you told them, hey, if you go to college and you get some liberal arts degree, you're going to come out and you're going to make six figures and you're going to be able to buy a home and have a family. And then they got out and they realized, oh, I can't get a job at all with this. It doesn't exist. I'm going to go be a barista for $15 an hour, or am I going to show my tits and make 10 grand a month? Look, I'm not saying it's the right decision, but I get it. If I was a young hot chick, that's a weird sentence. If I was a young hot chick and I was like, oh, I can work 40 hours a week and barely afford to rent a room in someone else's house, or I could just show my tits on webcam and I could buy a house, that's a fucking hard call, man. That's a hard call. So I have a lot of sympathy for these gals. I know. I'm Captain Savaho over here. Sorry. I just understand human nature. I get it. But the system made it hard. They led them down a bad path. So then people make decisions. It's kind of like the drug dealer in the hood. It's like when he commits a drive-by, do you still have sympathy for him? No, not at all. But before that, can you understand that someone who has no opportunity, there's no businesses that are hiring in his area, that his father was locked up on some bullshit nonviolent drug charge, and now he's just there with his single mom, surrounded by gangs, getting beat up if he doesn't join one, and he decides to sell drugs to try and get out? You don't have any sympathy for that? You can't understand that dynamic? Someone who's like, I can't even get a job, or if I can get one, it's going to be $7 an hour, or I can risk my life and make $5 grand a month selling, pot or crack or whatever. What do you think they're going to do? A lot of people are going to take that path. I can't really blame them. I look at the OnlyFans shit the same way. I do. I know it's going to be unpopular with some people, but I think it's right. I think it's true. It's human nature. People are going to take the best opportunity as long as it's not so morally reprehensible that they decide that it's a bridge too far. Well, when the risk reward is so slanted towards the reward side, particularly with some of these girls on OnlyFans just racking crazy amounts of money, who can blame them? I'm not gonna. But I think at the core, what we need to recognize is that it's a product of a system that's crumbling. It's a product of a system that's run on ESG, DEI framework. It's a product of a system that's run pushing kind of this Marxist ideology that you can't get ahead, that there is no meritocratic pathway forward, that it's just pure greed and nepotism, and if you don't know somebody, you can't get anywhere. And to some extent, that's true. That's not how it used to be. But that's a product of a declining civilization. So how do we repair that? Instead of looking at the symptoms of the declining civilization, which is the drug dealer, which is the OnlyFans girl, which is the incel that's jerking off to these broads 1,000 hours a week, what is the real focus? Should you blame all of those people, or should you say, okay, I'm not applauding any of their decisions, but I'd like to actually address the root cause. Why is the system structured in a way that it's failing so many people, particularly our young? And if you're not asking yourself that question, I've seen a lot of the, normal conservative pundits that are coming out, and it's very popular. It gets a lot of clicks to chastise either the TikTok girls or the OnlyFans chicks, incels. Like, I get it. I get why it's popular to do that. But is it productive? I guess in some ways, shaming people is productive a little bit. But at the end of the day, what I would like to see is to live in a functioning civilization that does not lead so many young people down this immoral path. And until we actually do that, well, I think we probably ought to shut the fuck up about shaming them so much. Unless you have, I think, unless you have the answers on how to fix the underlying problems, you should probably not be shaming them. Because you don't have an answer. You just have a finger. Well, I think we all ought to point the finger at ourselves a little bit and figure out why. Well, I'll tell you a few things. We shouldn't have a public education system at all. But if we're going to have one, it ought to be actually oriented towards something that creates people who are able to create a product that has value in the marketplace. I know, what a fucking crazy concept, but it's true. You shouldn't have people going to school with gender studies and all this other nonsense, which they did for decades, which has now produced an entire just fucking army of worthless people that can't provide anything to civilization and therefore become extraordinarily angry with capitalism, which they already learned was evil in college. So it just further proves to them that they're right, that the system is fucked up because capitalism is evil. But in reality, they're not providing anything to the system because their education was worthless. So you see, it's all just broken. And it just feeds upon itself. We have to stop the system from feeding upon itself. So you need to have if you're going to have a public education system at all, it has to be oriented towards what actually creates value. Like, I don't know, maybe accounting, maybe engineering, maybe plumbing, maybe electricians, construction work. Sure, doctors, nurses, that's all important too. Actually, things that we need that are not imminently replaceable by AI, which, by the way, is coming. It's coming real fast. So if we don't figure this shit out like yesterday, we're going to have, the problems we already have are extraordinary. 5 years from now, when 30% more of these jobs are gone because of AI, it could be higher, I might add. I may be way underselling the percentage of jobs that are going to be absorbed by AI. If you don't have an answer by then, the problem is going to go exponential. You're going to go from having 10 or 20 million young people who are just adrift to 50 million. And then we're totally fucked. That's how you get revolutions, ladies and gentlemen. So you can get serious about this or you can't. It's your choice, but it's coming. And on top of that, yeah, we fix the education system. We've got to fix the culture. We've got to fix the culture of, certainly we shouldn't be applauding people that take these pathways. That's not good either. We also need to fix the money. Fix the money, fix the world. I don't agree with that. But if you fix the money, you fix a hell of a lot of problems in the world. And this is a huge, huge one. The reason young people can't afford houses is because you printed trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions, and I could keep going for a very long time, of dollars, which ultimately inflated the value. So young people can't afford a house, and they can't even dream of owning a home. They can't even dream of it. Unless they show their tits on OnlyFans. And then you're like, oh, look at this stupid broad. How dare she? If you're a young person who couldn't get a house ever otherwise, am I going to hate on you for finding a way? Nope. I'm not. I'm also not going to applaud you for showing your tits on the internet, but I have to appreciate hustle. Just as I appreciate the hustle from the drug dealer. I do. That doesn't mean that I applaud the people that they're helping enable their addiction. And certainly if they become violent and kill people, I definitely don't applaud that. They ought to go to jail. I appreciate hustlers, man. I always have. I think that is kind of the entrepreneurial spirit, even if it's done in the black or the gray market. There's still something kind of noble about it. Kind of. So yeah, we've got a lot of fixes that need to be made. Not a lot of easy answers. But I think until we actually get serious about these issues, it's only going to get worse. And it's going to get worse rapidly. And banning TikTok ain't making this go away. And guess what? Banning OnlyFans wouldn't either. It would just drive it underground. You'd have more black market prostitution. That is just for the record. The increase in prostitution is indicative of a economy which is failing. Now, you can have the Biden administration, which God bless, he just left, or he's leaving in 48 hours. Ugh, so sick of him. But he's talking about all of his economic achievements and how inflation's at this, an incredibly low rate now compared to when he first came in, and unemployment rates in the record lows and blah blah blah. Yeah, sure. Let me just show you. If you actually included OnlyFans participation in the prostitution rates, like actual street walking prostitution, our economy ain't going so hot. That is exactly what you saw during Great Depression, the Great Recession. It's happening now. A lot of women are doing that, and some men. I know, weird. Our economy is not going too hot, and it's going to get really ugly if we don't fix these things. The underlying factors, not just the shame game. Because guess what? If TikTok's data collection is such a national security threat, then so is Meta and Google and every other company out there, every other American-based company. If they're collecting data on TikTok that's so dangerous that it could actually endanger our national security, well, that data being collected, I don't know how you say it either way. If that data being collected by domestic-based companies, given that there are spying operations not just from the CCP, but also a litany of other foreign powers, but also the United States government, well, then make a uniform rule that says that no companies doing business in the United States of America can collect data which would endanger our national security. Problem solved. Oh, but you can't do that. Now, can you? Because you want to spy on the American people. And at its core, the crux of the issue is that you don't want to stop. You don't want our adversaries doing the same. I don't want them doing it either. But you're an adversary of mine because you're not interested in me being free at all. If you were, you wouldn't be spying on me and doing everything in your power to hold on to that ability while forbidding it to the tune of banning TikTok in America so that these foreign countries can't do the same. That's the answer. If this is really dangerous, if it is, I'm not saying it is, but if it is, and that's your claim, well, then it's dangerous for any of these companies to be doing it, and you ought to make a uniform rule that forbids that. But you're not going to, and I think we all know why. Get you out of here on this, Biden's farewell address. Good riddance.
It's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before. More than a century ago, but the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy. They just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to.
If only someone could have done something to prevent that rise of the oligarchy. I don't know, like the President of the United States? You fucking asshole. I mean, on top of that, just consider this for a second. In his waning hours of his presidency, he issues the Medal of Freedom to George Soros, a guy who's responsible for donating millions and millions, if not billions of dollars to democratic causes all over the world for the past decades and decades and decades. Is that not oligarchy? Having a billionaire who just dumps money into your political endeavors? If it is, which it is, well, then so is Elon, okay? And so are all these other billionaires that are now coming out and being a little bit more friendly towards freedom. Look, the reality is that our system is broken. Our system is broken because politicians like Joe Biden, who were in power for 50 fucking years, created these problems. And they're certainly not going to get us out of it. So for him to get up there in his farewell address and lament the oligarchic situation in which we now have to deal, Well, who's responsible for that, Joe? And how dare you for not owning any of your significant participation in creating this paradigm? It's infuriating. Oh, might I add, it was started with Trump, not removing culpability from him whatsoever, but the largest wealth transfer in human history happened from 2020 through 2021 and 2. The largest ever. If you're going to complain about oligarchy, well, then you have to acknowledge that locking down the economy, but leaving the biggest businesses in America open to do business while small businesses were shut down and put into bankruptcy to the tune of tens of thousands. You own this oligarchy. And you cannot get that blood off your hands. And you warning me about it in your final farewell address is gaslighting. It's infuriating. And I pray that no American is dumb enough to think that that's not the system that they wanted, that that's not the system that they created tirelessly over decades. Central banking and government capture of corporations and basically fascism, which is really what this is more than oligarchy, that's the system they wanted. That's the system that gives them maximal power. It's not an accident. It's a consequence of deliberate action for decades. And if you're tired of it, if you're bothered by it, do not allow the people responsible for it to push this off as if this is some new threat because Elon Musk bought X. You Sally come lately lying motherfucker, you. I ain't buying it, and I hope you guys aren't either. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please do hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment if I got anything wrong. I'm sure I got a lot wrong, and you're going to want to debate me. All right, I'm prepared for it. Go ahead and leave a comment anyways. Do share the show around, and last but not least, if you want to support my work, you can subscribe on X at LibertyLockPod. I will follow you back, libertylockdown.locals.com to support my work also, and share the show around. That's the best way. Last but not least, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening right now. I appreciate your continued support. I'm going to be starting a show called Dangerous RTRDS. You could just decide what that stands for. It's Real Talk, Real Dudes with the homie Top Lobster and Raven, probably in February. And got some other things in the works which are still formulating or finalizing. So I'm not going to say anything about that. But appreciate you guys as always. See you soon. Peace.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?